I'm not sure why I'm writing this. Maybe because I need to get it off my chest, or maybe because I'm still trying to make sense of what happened to my family last month. I've always been skeptical about supernatural stuff, but what I'm about to tell you has me questioning everything I thought I knew about life and death. My name is Sarah. I'm 30 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio, with my mom and younger brother Jake. We've been living together since my dad passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was only 58, healthy as far as we knew, and then one Tuesday morning he just wasn't there anymore. No warning, no goodbye, nothing. The three of us have been struggling ever since. Not just emotionally, though that's been hard enough, but financially too. Dad was the main breadwinner, and even with his life insurance, we've been barely scraping by. Mom works part-time at a local grocery store. I'm a dental hygienist. And Jake just started community college while working weekends at Best Buy. We're making it work, but it's tight. Really tight. Mom has been the strongest of all of us, honestly. She rarely talks about missing Dad, rarely cries in front of us. She just keeps going, making sure we have dinner every night at 6:30 p.m. sharp, still buying Jake his favorite cereal, still asking about my dating life, even though I haven't been on a decent date in over a year. But I can see it in her eyes sometimes, this deep sadness that she tries to hide behind her daily routines. Which is why what happened on February 18th was so completely out of character for her. I remember the date exactly because it was a Sunday, and we always do laundry on Sundays. I was in the kitchen around 7 a.m. making coffee when Mom came downstairs. Usually she's already dressed and has her hair done by then. She's always been an early riser, but that morning she looked different. Her hair was messy. She was still in her pajamas and she had this strange expression on her face. Not scared exactly, but confused and maybe a little shaken. "You okay, Mom?" I asked, handing her a mug of coffee. She likes it black with just half a teaspoon of sugar. She took the mug but didn't drink from it right away. Instead, she just stood there staring at it like she was trying to figure something out. "I had the strangest dream last night," she finally said. Now, Mom doesn't usually talk about her dreams. She's pretty practical that way. But something in her voice made me pay attention. "What kind of dream?" She sat down at our little kitchen table, the same one Dad bought from a garage sale when they first got married. Her hands were wrapped around the mug like she was trying to warm them up, even though our heater was working fine. "I dreamed about your father," she said quietly. But it wasn't like the dreams I usually have about him. I'd heard her mention dreams about Dad before, always in passing. Usually they seemed to comfort her, or at least that's what I assumed. But this felt different. He was asking for help," she continued, looking directly at me now. "He kept saying, 'Margaret, you have to help me. Please, you have to help me.' Over and over. My mom's name is Margaret, but everyone calls her Maggie. Dad was the only one who called her Margaret regularly. Help with what?" I asked. "I don't know. That's the thing. In the dream, I kept asking him what he needed help with, but he wouldn't say. He just kept repeating it. And Sarah," she paused here, and I could see her hands were actually shaking slightly. "He looked so worried, so desperate. I've never seen him look like that, not even in my worst dreams about the heart attack." I didn't know what to say to that. What do you say when your mom tells you she dreamed about your dead father asking for help? Jake wandered into the kitchen then, probably drawn by the smell of coffee. My brother is 22, but still acts like he's 16 sometimes. He grabbed a bowl and started pouring cereal, completely oblivious to the conversation we were having. "Morning," he mumbled, not looking up from his Lucky Charms. "Jake," Mom said, "sit down for a minute." Something in her tone made him look up. Jake might act immature sometimes, but he's not stupid. He could tell something was going on. "What's wrong?" he asked, leaving his cereal and sitting down with us. Mom repeated what she'd told me about the dream. Jake's reaction was pretty much what I expected. He made a face like he wasn't sure if he should be concerned or annoyed. "Mom, it's just a dream," he said, but not in a dismissive way, more like he was trying to reassure her. "You probably just had too much coffee yesterday or something." "I know it was just a dream," Mom said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. It felt so real, more real than any dream I've ever had. And when I woke up, I could still hear his voice saying my name. That gave me chills, to be honest. Not because I believed it was supernatural or anything, but because Mom looked genuinely disturbed by it. In the 3 years since Dad died, I'd seen her sad, angry, frustrated, exhausted, but never scared. And she looked scared. "Did he say anything else?" I asked. "Besides asking for help?" Mom thought for a moment. "He said something about things being left undone, that there were things he never finished." Jake and I exchanged a look. Dad had been pretty organized about most things. He had his will updated, his life insurance in order, all his work stuff properly handed over when he retired early at 56. What could he have left undone? Like, what kind of things? Jake asked. "I don't know," Mom said again, sounding frustrated now. "Every time I tried to ask him in the dream, he just kept saying I had to help him, that I had to find something, but he never said what." We sat in silence for a few minutes. I could hear the refrigerator humming and cars driving by outside, normal Sunday morning sounds, but the atmosphere in our kitchen felt anything but normal. "Maybe we should go through some of Dad's stuff today," I suggested, not really sure why I was saying it. "I mean, there are still boxes in the basement we never went through. Maybe there's something—" I trailed off because I realized how crazy that sounded. Go through Dad's things because Mom had a weird dream? But at the same time, something about the idea felt right. Mom looked up at me with this expression of relief, like I'd just said exactly what she was hoping to hear. "Would you?" she asked. "I mean, I know it sounds silly, but I have this feeling, like there's something we missed." Jake shrugged. "I guess. I don't have anywhere to be today anyway." So that's how we ended up spending our Sunday afternoon in the basement, going through cardboard boxes that had been sitting there untouched for 3 years. Our basement isn't finished, just concrete floors and walls, with Dad's old workbench in one corner and our washing machine and dryer in another. Along the far wall, we'd stacked maybe a dozen boxes of Dad's things that we hadn't been ready to deal with right after he died. His clothes had gone to Goodwill pretty quickly, and we'd kept his important papers and photo albums upstairs. But these boxes were full of the random stuff: old work documents, hobby materials, books, things that didn't seem important enough to keep, but that we couldn't bring ourselves to throw away either. The first few boxes were exactly what we expected. Tax returns from the 1990s, instruction manuals for appliances we didn't even own anymore, old magazines about woodworking, Dad's weekend hobby. Jake got bored pretty quickly and kept checking his phone. Mom was going through everything methodically, like she was looking for something specific, even though she didn't know what it was. I was starting to think this was all just a way for Mom to process her grief when we opened the box labeled Office Misc. This one was different. It had Dad's old desk supplies, some framed photos from his work, a few notebooks, and at the very bottom, a manila envelope I didn't recognize. "What's this?" I asked, pulling it out. The envelope was sealed and had Margaret written on it in Dad's handwriting. Not Maggie like he usually wrote. Margaret. Mom went very still when she saw it. "I've never seen that before," she said quietly. Jake looked over from where he'd been half-heartedly sorting through a box of old Popular Mechanics magazines. "What is it?" "I don't know," I said, handing the envelope to Mom. "It has your name on it." Her hands were shaking again as she took it. For a moment, I thought she might not open it. Then she carefully tore along one edge and reached inside. What she pulled out made all 3 of us stop breathing for a second. It was a document, several pages thick, with last will and testament printed at the top, but it wasn't the will we'd used for probate after Dad died. This was different. Different lawyer, different date, different everything. "What the hell?" Jake said, which pretty much summed up what we were all thinking. Mom was scanning the first page, her eyes getting wider as she read. "This is dated 6 months before he died," she said. 6 months after the will we filed. "What does it say?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Mom kept reading, and I watched her expression change from confusion to shock to something that looked almost like fear. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "this changes everything." But before she could explain what she meant, the lights in the basement flickered. Not off, just a quick flicker, like when a power line gets hit by a tree branch during a storm. Except it wasn't stormy outside. It was a clear, cold February afternoon. We all looked up at the ceiling, then at each other. "Probably just the old wiring," Jake said, but his voice sounded uncertain. Mom was still staring at the will in her hands. "He knew," she said. "Somehow he knew we would find this." I wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to see what the will said, wanted to understand why Dad would have hidden a second will, and why he'd apparently never mentioned it to anyone. But something about that moment, the three of us in that basement, surrounded by boxes of a dead man's belongings, holding a document that shouldn't exist, made me feel like we'd crossed some kind of line, like we'd opened a door we might not be able to close. The lights flickered again, and this time they stayed off for almost 30 seconds before coming back on. "We should take this upstairs," Mom said, standing up quickly. "We need to read this properly." As we gathered up the will and headed for the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Not by anything threatening, exactly, but by someone who had been waiting a long time for this moment. Someone who could finally rest now that we'd found what he'd been trying to show us. I keep telling myself it was just coincidence. That Mom's dream didn't really mean anything. That we would have found that will eventually anyway when we finally got around to going through all of Dad's things. But I can't explain the timing. I can't explain why the lights flickered at exactly that moment. And I definitely can't explain the feeling I had. That we all had. That we weren't alone in that basement. Tomorrow, we're taking the will to Dad's old lawyer to find out what it means and whether it's legally valid. Part of me is excited to finally understand what Dad was trying to tell us. But another part of me is scared of what we might discover. Because if Mom's dream was real, if Dad really was trying to reach us from wherever he is now, then what else might be real that I've always dismissed as impossible? I guess I'll find out soon enough. Has anyone else here ever experienced something like this? I'm still trying to convince myself it's all just coincidence, but the rational part of my brain is having a harder and harder time with that explanation. I barely slept last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about that basement, about the way the lights flickered right when we found the will, about the look on Mom's face when she realized what we were holding. We spent most of yesterday evening trying to read through the document, but honestly, legal language might as well be a foreign language to us. What we could understand, though, was enough to know that this wasn't just some duplicate of the will we'd already dealt with. This was something completely different. The appointment with Dad's old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was set for 10 a.m. Mom barely touched her breakfast, just pushed scrambled eggs around her plate and kept checking the clock. Jake was trying to act like it was no big deal, but I caught him Googling how to contest a will on his phone while he thought we weren't looking. "What if this changes who gets what?" he asked as we were getting ready to leave. "What if Dad left everything to charity or something?" "Jake, stop," Mom said, but I could tell she was worried about the same thing. We'd been living in Dad's house for 3 years now, assuming it was ours. What if it wasn't? Henderson's office is in one of those old downtown buildings that probably hasn't been updated since the 1980s. Brown carpet, wood paneling, the kind of place that smells like coffee and old paper. Mr. Henderson himself is probably in his 70s, with thick glasses and a habit of clearing his throat before he speaks. "Well," he said after we'd explained why we were there, "this is certainly unusual." "May I see the document?" Mom handed over the will with the same careful movement she'd used since we found it, like she was afraid it might disintegrate if she wasn't gentle enough. Mr. Henderson put on reading glasses over his regular glasses and spent what felt like forever examining each page. Every so often, he'd make a sound or flip back to a previous page. The three of us just sat there in uncomfortable silence, listening to the clock on his wall tick away the minutes. Finally, he looked up at us. "This is definitely your father's signature," he said, "and it's properly witnessed and notarized. The date is indeed 6 months after the will we filed for probate." "So it's real?" I asked. "It's legally valid?" "It appears to be, yes. Which means, technically, this should have been the will used for probate, not the earlier one." Mom's face had gone pale. "What does that mean for us?" Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Well, let me walk you through the major changes. The previous will left everything to you, Margaret. The house, the life insurance, the savings accounts, everything. This will is more specific." He flipped to the second page. The house is left in a trust for you to live in for the remainder of your life, but upon your death, it goes to a local animal shelter. The life insurance still goes to you, but there's an additional policy here that I don't see in our records. $200,000 that's to be split equally between Sarah and Jake for educational expenses. Jake sat up straighter. $200,000? That's what it says. There's also mention of a safety deposit box at First National Bank that contains, and I quote, "documents and items essential for my family's future security." The three of us looked at each other. Dad had never mentioned a safety deposit box. "Mr. Henderson," Mom said slowly, "why would Robert have written a second will and never told anyone about it? And why would he hide it?" The old lawyer shrugged. "People do strange things when they think about their mortality, Margaret. Maybe he changed his mind about some provisions but wasn't ready to discuss it with the family yet. Maybe he was protecting someone or something." "Protecting us from what?" I asked. "I have no idea. But the mention of this safety deposit box suggests there's more to discover. You'll need to present this will to the bank, along with death certificates and identification. As his widow and named executor, you should be able to access it." An hour later, we were standing in First National Bank, talking to a customer service representative who looked like she was maybe 25 and clearly had never dealt with anything like this before. "So you found a will you didn't know existed?" she asked, typing something on her computer. "That's weird. Tell me about it," Jake muttered. After some phone calls and paperwork, she led us down to the basement vault. The safety deposit box area was smaller than I'd expected. Just a room with walls lined with little metal doors, like oversized post office boxes. "Box 247, the representative said, checking her paperwork. "Your father opened this account. Let's see. About 8 months before he passed away." 8 months. So he'd gotten the box, then written the new will a couple months later, like he'd been planning something. The representative used her key and Mom's key, which we'd found in Dad's desk drawer years ago but never knew what it was for, to open the box. She pulled out a long metal container and set it on the table in the center of the room. "Take your time," she said. "Let me know when you're finished." After she left, the three of us just stared at the box for a minute. It was about the size of a shoebox, made of gray metal, with a small lock that was already open. "Well," Mom said, "here goes nothing." She lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was an envelope marked, "Read this first," in Dad's handwriting. Underneath that were more envelopes, some smaller boxes, and what looked like a bunch of papers. Mom opened the first envelope with shaking hands and pulled out a letter. As she read it, tears started running down her face. "What does it say?" I asked. She cleared her throat and started reading aloud. "My dearest Margaret, Sarah, and Jake, if you're reading this, then you've found what I hoped you would find, and I'm no longer there to explain it myself. First, I need you to know that everything I did was to protect you and provide for you, even after I'm gone. Margaret, the dream you had that led you to look for this, I know about it. I know that sounds impossible, but I need you to trust me. There are things in this box that will secure your future and answer questions you didn't even know you had. The life insurance policy Jake and Sarah will inherit comes from money I earned through investments I never told you about. I didn't want to get your hopes up in case they didn't work out, but they did work out, better than I ever imagined. Sarah, the papers marked with your name contain information about a trust fund that will cover your student loans and help you start your own dental practice if that's what you want. Jake, your papers contain information about a college fund that will cover not just community college, but a 4-year degree anywhere you want to go. Margaret, your papers contain the deed to a property in Florida that I bought as a retirement surprise. It's paid off and ready for you whenever you want to use it. Mom stopped reading and just stared at the letter. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Where did he get this money? How did he afford all this?" I reached for one of the envelopes marked Sarah and opened it. Inside were bank statements, investment records, and legal documents I didn't understand. But the numbers I could understand were incredible. "Mom," I said, my voice sounding strange even to me. "According to this, there's $75,000 set aside just for my student loans." Jake was going through his envelope too. "This says I have a college fund worth $150,000. How is that even possible?" Mom kept reading the letter. "I know you're wondering how I managed all this without you knowing. The truth is, I started investing in cryptocurrency and tech stocks about 10 years ago, using money from small side jobs and odd work I did on weekends. I never told you because I didn't want you to worry if I lost it all. But I didn't lose it. By the time I wrote this letter, those small investments had grown into enough money to change our lives. I was planning to tell you everything on our 30th anniversary, but then the heart attack happened. I hid this will because I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me suddenly, you would have time to grieve first before having to deal with financial windfalls and big decisions. I thought maybe after a year or two, you'd go through my things and find it naturally. But if you found it because of a dream, Margaret, then I want you to know that love really doesn't end with death. Sometimes we find ways to reach the people who matter most to us. The letter went on with more practical details about bank accounts and legal procedures. But I'd stopped listening. I was too busy trying to process what all of this meant. Dad had been secretly investing in cryptocurrency. He'd bought property in Florida. He'd somehow managed to secure our entire financial future without any of us knowing. "There's more stuff in here," Jake said, reaching deeper into the box. He pulled out a small jewelry case and opened it. Inside was Mom's grandmother's ring, the one that had been lost in a break-in at their apartment 20 years ago. "Oh my God," Mom whispered, taking the case from Jake. "I thought this was gone forever. How did he—" Underneath the ring case was a folder full of papers. As I flipped through them, I realized they were all related to the break-in from 20 years ago. Police reports, insurance claims, and receipts from a pawn shop, dated just 2 years ago. "He found it," I said, showing Mom the receipts. "He tracked down your grandmother's ring and bought it back." By now, all three of us were crying. Not sad crying, but that overwhelming kind of crying that happens when something is too big and too wonderful to process normally. But then Jake pulled out the last item in the box, a small digital recorder, the kind reporters use for interviews. "What's this for?" he asked, turning it over in his hands. There was a piece of tape on it with "Play Me Last," written in Dad's handwriting. We all looked at each other. After everything we'd discovered, I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever was on that recorder. "Should we?" Mom asked. "I guess we've come this far," I said. Jake pressed play. Dad's voice filled that little bank vault room, clear as if he'd been standing right there with us. "If you're listening to this, then you found everything. And you understand now that I've been planning for your future long after I'm gone. But there's one more thing I need to tell you. Margaret, I know about the dreams you've been having since I died. Not just the one that led you here, but all of them. The ones where I tell you I'm okay, where I show you our old apartment, where we dance to that song from our wedding. I know about them because I've been there. I don't understand how or why, but somehow I've been able to visit you while you sleep. And I need you to know that every word I've said in those dreams is true. I am okay. I am at peace. And I love you just as much now as I did when we were 22 and stupid and planning our whole lives together. Sarah, Jake, I love you both more than words can express. I'm proud of who you've become and who you're still becoming. Take care of your mother and each other. And Margaret, the ring isn't just your grandmother's ring. Look inside the band. Mom immediately turned the ring over and peered inside. There, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "Dream of me." "I had that engraved right before I put everything in this box," Dad's voice continued, "because I want you to know that whenever you dream of me, I'm really there. Not in the way you might expect, but in the way that matters most. I love you all. Be happy. Live fully. And don't spend too much time missing me. I'm not really gone." The recording ended, and we sat there in complete silence for at least 5 minutes. The only sound was the fluorescent lights humming overhead and Jake sniffling as he tried not to cry in front of us. Finally, Mom spoke. "How could he have known about my dreams?" she asked. "How could he have known I would have that specific dream about him asking for help?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. But what I do know is that we walked into that bank as a struggling family trying to make ends meet, and we walked out as something else entirely. Not rich, exactly, but secure, safe, provided for in ways we'd never imagined possible. The practical part of my brain keeps trying to find logical explanations. Maybe Dad researched cryptocurrency investment strategies online and just got lucky. Maybe he'd mentioned the ring to us before and we forgot. Maybe Mom's subconscious mind knew there were things we hadn't found yet and created the dream to motivate us to keep looking. But then I think about Dad's voice on that recording, talking about visiting Mom in her dreams. I think about the timing of everything, how we found the will exactly when we needed to find it, how every revelation came at the perfect moment. And I think about something that happened as we were leaving the bank. We were walking to our car, still stunned and trying to process everything, when Mom suddenly stopped in the middle of the parking lot. "Do you smell that?" she asked. Jake and I stopped and sniffed the air. At first I didn't notice anything unusual, but then, there it was. Faint, but unmistakable. Old Spice aftershave, Dad's aftershave. "That's impossible," Jake said, looking around the parking lot. "There's nobody here." But Mom was smiling for the first time since this whole thing started. Not a sad smile or a confused smile, but a real, genuine, happy smile. "He's here," she said simply. "He's letting us know he's proud of us for finding everything." The smell lasted maybe 30 seconds, and then it was gone. Just car exhaust and cold February air. I want to believe it was just someone else's cologne drifting on the wind, or a scent memory triggered by all the emotion we'd been through. But I can't shake the feeling that Mom was right, that somehow Dad was there with us in that parking lot, watching his family discover the incredible gift he'd left us, finally able to rest, knowing that we were going to be okay. We're meeting with a financial planner tomorrow to figure out how to handle all of this properly. Mom keeps reading and rereading Dad's letter. Jake has been researching colleges he never thought he could afford. And me? I'm trying to figure out how to reconcile everything I thought I knew about life and death with what's happened to us over the past 2 days. Because if Dad really has been visiting Mom in her dreams, if he really did somehow guide us to that will, then what else is possible that I've always dismissed as impossible? I keep looking at that ring, at those tiny engraved words, "Dream of me." And for the first time since Dad died, I hope I do. I wasn't sure I'd write this final part, but after all the messages from people sharing similar experiences, I felt I had to finish the story. The night after we found everything, none of us could sleep. Around 2 a.m., I found Mom in the kitchen, sitting in the dark with coffee. "I keep waiting to wake up," she said. "This feels too good to be true." Jake came down too, and we talked for the first time since Dad died. Really talked. Around 3:30 a.m., all 3 of our phones chimed at exactly the same time. Text messages. But when we checked, there were no new messages. "What time was that?" Mom asked. 3:32, Jake and I said together. Mom went pale. "That's when your father proposed. March 3rd at 2 a.m. We always called 3-3 at 2 our special time. The next day, we met with Dad's financial planner, Janet Morrison. Turns out she'd been working with Dad for 5 years without us knowing. "Robert was very specific about how this should be handled," she explained. "He made me promise to help you understand everything without overwhelming you." The numbers were staggering. Dad's cryptocurrency investments alone had grown from $10,000 to nearly $800,000. Combined with everything else, we were looking at over $1 million. "But it comes with conditions," Janet said. "Sarah, your trust is only for education and starting your practice. Jake, yours is only for college. And Margaret," she handed Mom another sealed envelope, "he wanted you to read this after understanding the finances." Mom opened it right there. As she read, she started crying and laughing at the same time. "He wants me to go to Italy," she said. "We always planned to go for our 30th anniversary. He says I should go anyway." That Thursday night, something strange happened. Mom called us downstairs urgently. In the living room, Dad's wedding photo had moved. It was angled toward the couch where we usually sat. "Did either of you move this?" she asked. We hadn't. It had been facing forward that morning. Mom straightened it, but the next morning it had moved again. Same angle. "Maybe he wants me to remember something about our wedding," Mom said, sitting where the photo pointed. She closed her eyes, thinking. Then suddenly, the ring. At our wedding, when Robert put the ring on my finger, he whispered, "Even when I'm gone, dream of me and I'll find you." The same words engraved in Grandma's ring. That night, Mom tested something. She put the photo face down before bed. The next morning, it was upright again, facing the couch. "Robert, I get the message," Mom said to the photo. You're still here. Then she started talking to it like Dad was actually there. I understand what you were trying to do, she said. You wanted to take care of us even after you couldn't be here anymore. I'm going to Italy like you wanted. We're all going to live the lives you made possible for us. The photo never moved again after that conversation. It's been 2 weeks now. Mom booked her Italy trip. Jake got accepted to Ohio State. I'm opening my dental practice next year. And Mom's dreams changed too. Instead of Dad asking for help, now he just visits to say he's proud of us. Last night he said love is the only thing that survives death unchanged, Mom told me yesterday. Everything he did was just love expressed through action. I think about that a lot. Dad spent his final years secretly building our future, then found a way to guide us to it even after death. His love became investments, trust funds, hidden wills, and carefully planned surprises. Whether that's supernatural or just natural, I don't know. But it's real. People ask if I believe in ghosts now. Maybe Dad's spirit is around. Maybe it isn't. Maybe the photo moving was coincidence. Maybe Mom's dreams are just grief processing. But love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes form. Dad's love became financial security and new opportunities. It became words engraved inside a ring and a recording that knew exactly what we needed to hear. Next week, we're scattering some of Dad's ashes in his garden, where his tomatoes still grow every summer. He'd like being part of something that keeps nurturing the people he loved. I don't know if I'll dream about him or smell his cologne again, but I know he's at peace now, knowing we found everything he left for us. Sometimes the most supernatural thing is love that refuses to let death have the final word.